Hello, welcome to the Aston Villa versus Newcastle United preview. I'm Andrew Musgrove from the Newcastle office, Chronicle Live, as you can see, joined by Matt Kendrick, who'll be a familiar face to you Villa supporting viewers. We haven't got Dan. I'm taking the reins today. It's an interesting game tomorrow, isn't it, Matt? Bit of extra spice with Steve Bruce returning to Villa Park as well. Just your initial thoughts on what you think is to come tomorrow night.
Yeah, I just want to make a disclaimer before we get up and running for the Newcastle fans. This is not my bedroom, by the way. This is my son's bedroom, so I'm not allowed to have Claret and Blue in my matrimonial suite. But yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because kind of Bruce is back on a collision course with Villa at a time where, although Villa, feeling sorry for ourselves after what happened with that first goal, particularly against Man City, there's a really good kind of vibe and a good feel-good factor around Villa at the moment, the way they've kicked on from that first season. Whereas we know we're welcoming a Newcastle team kind of, and down on its luck, I suppose, disillusioned fan base and Bruce probably firefighting to try and keep his job again. So it's a familiar narrative, really. The Villa fans, even though the stadium will be empty again, sadly, will take great delight if we beat Bruce and beat Newcastle and get Villa back up and running after this kind of COVID interruption. Obviously, from a Newcastle point of view, if that is the fate for Newcastle tomorrow, I was going to say it pushes Bruce another step closer to the exit door, but I'm not sure that's necessarily the case, is it, Andrew?
No, I think that Leeds game is the important one. I don't think you can afford to lose both of them, but you especially can't afford to lose to Leeds, who are a bit close on the table to Newcastle. But look, he needs a win. I mean, it before December the 12th, which is the last game Newcastle won, they beat West Brom. They just about won that game. They were performing badly, but the results were coming every now and then, which means they were pretty safe from relegation. Past month, though, the results have mirrored the performance, and here we find ourselves without a win in 9 in all competitions. They can't score. They don't look threatening. Steve Bruce has come out and said the gloves are off. He'll do it his way. Didn't work against Arsenal, and we come against the Villa side who, I haven't seen a lot of Villa. I saw them against City, but they, despite the COVID and everything that's gone on in the past few weeks, they look threatening against City. They had 1 or 2 chances. And I do fear a little bit for Newcastle coming into this game because Villa, like you say, have just got a good feel around them. And when you go into a game as Newcastle are down in the dumps, knowing that a win is crucial and that the teams below you are starting to catch up, the pressure on Steve Bruce is huge. And then you've got the added spices at the start with Steve Bruce returning to Villa. So there's lots of little side stories coming into play here.
Yeah, I mean, I think tomorrow, I think Villa will score. There's been very few occasions where they haven't scored this season. Obviously, they didn't score against Manchester City in midweek, although it wasn't for the want of trying. They did try and go toe-to-toe with Manchester City, which probably is another sign of the advances that Villa have made, even since, in the last 6 months, since the end of last season when they stayed up on the last day of the season. So it's interesting, isn't it? I think Villa will score. If Bruce's default setting is to come and bottle it up from the offset, what does that mean? If Villa do score, does Bruce have a plan B to try and kind of crank up the levels and get Villa as an attacking force? I mean, it's interesting because hear little bits about we still keep an interest in Bruce and what's happening since he left Villa, but hear little bits and pieces. And when he speaks about Villa, he seems to reference the kind of big investment that the club have made in recent seasons. He's right that Villa have spent big in the last couple of windows. In the first window, upon getting into the Premier League, they needed to invest that money because they've got a tired, aging squad with players who were past the best and a lot of players who were on loan. So they didn't have a squad, so they need to spend big that year. And then what they've had the luxury of doing in the last summer is being able to kind of refine that squad. Had to sign 5 players rather than signing the 13 of the previous summer, and were able to add quality. I suppose the question that I've got for you, really, from a Newcastle point of view, is, to me, the Newcastle squad looks decent. Should Bruce be getting more of a tune out of what he's got, really?
I think he should do, but there was major flaws in that Newcastle United side as well. I mean, the midfield just gets bypassed time and time again. And you can see that he's trying to work out how to fix the issue. last January, they went after the guy from Lille, and they thought that deal done. It didn't happen. The player didn't want to end up joining Newcastle. And then this season, he's had 10 different midfield partnerships. I saw a stat yesterday, which is remarkable. He had Shelvey and Matty Longstaff against Arsenal, which was the first time they've played together. From my memory, and it's things like that, and you can just see he's trying to work it out, but there's no consistency. But the midfield is a major issue, because every time a team who are good attacking, the midfield's just not there. And the opposition can just walk through, and then you've got no protection for the defense, and it just leaves them vulnerable. And yes, Newcastle have some decent players, but when you haven't got a midfield who can break up play, who can create, then you have got an issue, because they're the two really important parts of a counter-attacking side that you stick a foot in and then you get down to the end sharpish, and it's just not there at the moment. And look, in an ideal world, you'd want to see a new midfielder come in, but given the COVID and the impact on budgets and what have you, I can't see that happening. And if a new midfielder doesn't come in this month, it's going to be difficult, because that issue's just going to roll on until the summer, regardless if Steve Bruce is here or not. A new manager would have exactly the same issue. But yeah, he should be doing a little bit better. But again, you're relying on Callum Wilson. He hasn't got the support because of that midfield issue. And if you can't get the ball to your striker, he's only hit 2 in the last 9. You're gonna struggle, to create chances, and you're going to struggle to score goals as well.
Yeah, I mean, without kind of wishing to kick you guys when you're down, that's actually a department that's become strong for Villa. The midfield department is probably the strongest it's been for a generation, potentially, and that's quite a claim, I know. But even without John McGinn, who's suspended for tomorrow, to be fair, John McGinn was Steve Bruce's leaving present for Aston Villa. He might
I remember saying last year in one of the press conferences that I'm sure the words were something like he was his best signing because he didn't cost that much. I'm sure he references him as his best ever signing. It was around about the time when Man United were said to be really interested in him. It must have been last December, the press conference, when we were allowed to see the manager face to face. But yeah, he's very proud of that one, isn't he? And you can see why, because McGinn's an excellent player.
Yeah, he's definitely the best signing that he made for Villa. He was a bargain, I think, 2.5-3 million quid. I think Celtic are kicking themselves for not signing him because he's a big Celtic fan. But yeah, he's exactly the kind of. But I mean, I think the point I'm going to make is that he's missing, and I think Villa can still put out a really kind of strong midfield. They've got Douglas Luiz, who's the real anchor in front of the back four, who's come on leaps and bounds. Couldn't really find his way early in last season, but during lockdown, kind of worked hard. The lockdown was I keep jumping all over the place, but the lockdown was a massive factor in Villa staying up last season, because it gave Dean Smith a chance to just take stock and reflect, and actually, although the players couldn't train together for a long time, he could actually, I think he was doing kind of appraisals via kind of Zoom calls and stuff like that, and really having more time with his players than individually than he could in a normal kind of run of fixtures. Douglas Luiz was one of the ones who really benefited from that. His English has come on leaps and bounds as well, I'm led to believe, and he's become a real impressive player in that kind of destructive force in front of the back four, but one who can do it with a bit of class and can use the ball as well. Then you've got everybody knows about Jack Grealish and what he can bring. I'll probably speak about him in more detail shortly. I've got Ross Barkley back as well after a fitness issue. Looks like if McGinn is out, well, he is out. It looks like they've got a young rookie called Jacob Ramsey, who's the kind of next cab off the rank, who we've got high hopes for. He's managed to squeeze in ahead of Conor Hourihane to the extent that Hourihane's now gone out on loan. Villa is strong. I don't want to kind of build Villa up too much, because we know that we can jinx things and tempt fate, but Villa are strong in all departments at the moment. Until Wednesday night, they'd got the second best defensive record in the Premier League. And it's not just the Jack Grealish show now. You know, with these Ollie Watkins, who hasn't scored for a glut of games, but still is such an important player in that team in terms of linking player, making the ball stick. And Villa can score if they've got a centre forward who's not scoring goals, which Ollie Watkins will. He'll score goals again fairly quickly and fairly regularly, I'm sure. But if they're not, they've got threats from all over the place. Like Traore has conjured up a few goals recently. So has El Ghazi when he's played. I think Trezeguet's fit now again, so that's another option on the right wing. Grealish has added assists and goals. You know, Barkley's capable of adding goals. They're just, I don't know, it's just, I think Villa have almost kind of, they had to get that gritty kind of horrible, tense season out of the way first of all. It was just kind of survival at all costs. And now they thought, we're here now. We might as well kind of enjoy it and try and challenge where we can.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because we've been speaking over the last couple of days about the game coming up on Saturday. And one of the questions I asked you for a piece that will be going out tomorrow is about Steve Bruce talking about work in progress. He's been there 18 months. And I remember speaking last season, I think it was just before the trip to St James's Park to Ashley. And there were rumours, you know, and a bit of discontent with Dean Smith, that some fans weren't too happy with the way things were going. And yet, fast forward a few months, here you guys are, you know, a couple of games in hand, you'll be comfortably in the top 10 if you win those games. And that remarkable turnaround, is it in many ways kind of a sign to sticking with the manager? And, you know, if you stick with the manager who's got a belief in his system, it'll come good in the end?
It's interesting, you know, for me, during lockdown or behind closed doors football, when managers are under pressure, I've always been a big believer that you kind of take your lead from the fan base. So, you know, as soon as the away fans turn, you know, to me, I know that if the away fans have turned, and this is for Villa, but it applies for other clubs, I believe. As soon as the away fans have turned, that's the kind of hardcore who try and be as patient as they can. And as soon as they've gone, your manager's done. You know, he's got a week, 2 weeks maximum normally after the end of that. And I think because you haven't got that vibe in stadiums at the moment, it's hard to. We can judge we can judge the mood quite accurately that Newcastle fans are not happy at the moment, whether they're inside St James's Park or not, or they're in the away end at Premier League grounds or not. But I think because. I think Dean Smith would have been given that extra luxury anyway, because he got plenty of credit in the bank for getting Villa in the Premier League in the first place. So I think that the credit in the bank he got for that would have outweighed the credit in the bank that he'd got for being one of our own, being a boyhood Villa fan and all that. I don't know. I mean, in answer to your question, sticking with managers is a good thing, but only if you're convinced that manager is the right man and he's showing signs that they will get it right. Now, Dean Smith was able to do that, I think. And it was Dean Smith's first year in the Premier League. It was most of that squad's first year in the Premier League, you know, with this exception of Jack Grealish and, you know, Tyrone Mings might have played a handful of games there for Bournemouth. There wasn't a great deal of Premier League experience in there. And I think Smith was cut that slack by the owners. The owners are no mugs, you know. They didn't cut. Well, I wouldn't say they didn't cut Steve Bruce that slack. I think they did try and give Steve Bruce a chance in the early days, but it was clear that he wasn't. You know, it became a bit directionless. I don't think you stick with a manager for the sake of it. The manager's got to justify that he's got a plan and that he can work through these issues and show that he can take the team forward. I think Dean Smith convinced Wes Edens and Nassif Sawiris that he could do that. That's why they stuck with him during that sticky patch last season, and how he's repaying that faith. It's up to Bruce, isn't it? You know, Bruce has got the circumstances are so different, aren't they? Do you know what I mean? Bruce doesn't have that credit in the bank to start with. Bruce is following a really popular manager in Rafa, whereas Smith was following Steve Bruce without being unkind. I don't know. You'll be able to tell me better, Andrew. Do we look like we're kind of reaching the end game where patience is wearing thin, not only with the fans but in the boardroom potentially?
I can't speak for the boardroom, but you can judge it on social media that the patience is definitely wearing thin, and it's a case of that beforehand. When Steve Bruce needed a result, it came. Whether it didn't always look pretty. Well, it never looked pretty, but he got the result, which then extended, the stay and what have you. But now it's at the point, like I said before, where the results are mirroring the performance, and you are looking at these games and you're thinking, okay, Villa have been impacted by COVID, but I'm coming to this game still expecting Villa to win the game. And then you look at Leeds, horrible run of form. But again, you look at what happened back in, November, 5-2 defeat against Leeds. And you fear there for Newcastle on Tuesday. But at the same time, like you said, he's got the circumstances. He's replacing Rafa Benitez. It would have taken a manager of the highest level to come in and really get a clean slate, because it was Rafa Benitez, great tactical manager. And but at the same time, Steve Bruce, this is his club, and you can't begrudge him taking the opportunity, whether he's the right man or not. I don't think anyone would turn it down when you're in his position. But looking now at where Newcastle sit, something has to happen. He has to start getting the results. Again, because you've got Burnley who beat Liverpool, and the teams below them are starting to churn out results. And Newcastle are just dropping like a rock. And of course, they've had the impact of COVID, but then so Villa. And, there's been the takeover playing in the background, which hasn't helped, and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's what happens on the pitch. And Steve Bruce has come out fighting last week. And again, he said that he's going to play a similar way, probably as he did against Arsenal, as he will tomorrow against Villa. But this is a winnable game. And, Newcastle need to pick a result up, whether it be a point, 3 points, but to go 10 games in all competitions without a victory, it's just unthinkable. And for me, what the biggest issue is that when you draw against clubs, say Liverpool, for instance, it was refreshing to see Newcastle actually try to lay a glove on Liverpool. Kevin Clark could have won it with a header. Whereas previously against Man City, they came in that game and they just looked like they were set up not to lose. Against Sheffield United, they were set up not to lose, and they didn't do anything. And what you want is your team to actually do something on the pitch and look threatening. And it'll be interesting tomorrow to see how they set up against Villa. Will they try and hurt Villa, or will they try and just contain them and see what happens? I mean, if they do try and just contain them, what happens from the Villa point of view? Does Dean Smith welcome that? If Newcastle just sit back and say, well, come on, then come and attack her?
I think so. I think I was saying before, I mean, it's difficult if they do go out with a mindset of containment to then change tack halfway through if you need to. I think Villa back themselves in most areas of the pitch now. Like I said previously, clubs probably could have done a job on Jack Grealish, or tried to do a job on Jack Grealish and shut down any kind of any routes to goal that Villa had. That's not the case anymore. There's options all over the field. They can play through teams. They've got pace and attack. They've got Jack Grealish's quality in wide areas and drifting inside. They've got they've got the three wingers, the three right wingers now, who are kind of between them. Obviously, they're not playing all at the same time, but they're increasing the performance level. It's that competition for places. So I think Dean Smith will back Villa to break down Newcastle, regardless of how they're set up. The interesting thing that I find from the outside looking in is the Newcastle boys is there's lots of hallmarks now from the kind of the last couple of weeks of Bruce at Villa. And to me, I'm not knocking Steve Bruce in terms of the initial impact that he had at Aston Villa, because Villa were a mess. They'd been relegated. The owner back then, Tony Jaa, had recruited Roberto Di Matteo, who was more of a kind of a trophy manager in a sense. You know what I mean? He won the Champions League with Chelsea, and it was kind of seen as this kind of this vanity appointment, really. Ripped that up within 12 weeks, having backed him with several signings. And then Bruce comes in and tries to bring a bit of a grown-up grown-up maturity to the place, really, and settle things down. And he managed to galvanise the dressing room and got Villa competitive. And it wasn't particularly pretty, like you say, but he got Villa competitive. But as soon as Villa fell short, you could sense the frustration on Bruce. You could sense the frustration that the methods that he thought would work weren't working. And that's where it got a little bit kind of, I've said this before, he became the master of excuse management and, started trying to kind of downgrade, play down the expectations and saying, overplaying what he'd done and underplaying, Villa's expectations. And it just became a little bit, listen, we know you're an honest man, Steve, and we know you're trying to do the right job, but if you're failing, you've got to be kind of big enough to say that. And it got a little bit, little pops at the supporters for expecting too much. And I think there's something he said about, the mad, it's the mad fewer against me, and the intelligent fans know what I'm about, and all this kind of thing. And started playing the card. Oh, they were never going to accept me because I was Birmingham City manager, and all these things that were just nonsense, to be honest. With Alex McLeish and Steve Bruce both being ex-Birmingham managers, that wasn't the issue. It was the issue that Villa fans kind of, I wouldn't say there's a Villa way and expect a certain thing, but they expect Villa to behave like a big club. Do you know what I mean? They expect Villa to be. We don't want to be patronised by people downplaying our expectations. We're not European. We know we're not European Cup winners anymore. But I think it was that Bruce, the Villa fans. I can't speak on behalf of all Villa fans, but Villa fans do think valued that kind of stability that Bruce brought. But the way he tried to get Villa back up and running was to try and, it was almost kind of boom or bust. Loan players and experienced players with no resale value. That's fine if it gets you there. If it doesn't get you there, you're just left with an expensive legacy again. Whereas I think what Villa are trying to do post-Bruce are built by players, on the way up, by players with kind of sell-on value they can learn and develop. And I think as a long-term strategy, fingers crossed that will be better.
I mean, just looking at Saturday's game, missing McGinn, as we've mentioned, but everyone else seems to be fit and raring to go. I mean, we've mentioned Jack Grealish there, obviously the star man, but apart from Jack, who else is the player that Newcastle really need to keep quiet and need to keep tabs on if they're going to get anything from the game?
I think, like I said, I've said nice things about Ollie Watkins. He's going through a little drought of his own. I think there was the talk, wasn't there? I don't know whether Newcastle looked at Watkins, but I know that Villa, Callum Wilson was on Villa's radar. So I think it'll be interesting to see, kind of how that little battle plays out. It's a really nice thing to say, but Villa have got good quality players in all areas of the pitch. The back four has become super well drilled. Emi Martinez was a brilliant signing. Why Arsenal let him go, I don't know, but we'll take that one and we'll enjoy it. He's become a kind of rock behind a back four that's got two really, really strong emerging English central defenders in Tyrone Mings and Ezri Konsa. Matty Cash is a flying fullback. He's one of those ones who fits that profile of being somebody who's on the up, who can only get better. Probably Matt Targett on the other side. I won't go through the whole team, I promise, but probably Matt Targett on the other side. I think Newcastle had a little kind of look at him themselves. I think when he was at Southampton, he's probably been seen as the weakest part of the team recently. Well, not recently, but previously. But even he now he's become super consistent. Don't give much away, and they pack a punch. And from being relegation fodder last season, I don't want to get too carried away because I know you can always end up kind of having the rug pulled from you, especially as a Villa fan. We've seen this before. We've had so many false dawns and fallen flat on our face. But I'd be disappointed if Villa finish outside the top 10. And then how much higher they finish above the top 10 probably depends on VAR and what happens in Stockley Park from week to week, I think.
I'm pleasantly surprised if Newcastle finish mid-table, because at the moment they're falling rapidly. And the cushion to the relegation zone is still quite healthy, but obviously it only takes a couple of wins, and I can't see really where Newcastle are going to get the next couple of points from. Steve Bruce in his press conference today did confirm that Alan St-Maximin is going to be in the squad. He's been missing with COVID. He's had long COVID as well. And, I don't think anyone actually expected him to be back this quickly. I think he only came back to the training ground earlier in the week. So to have him in the squad, Steve Bruce says he'll play a part, is huge. If nothing else, it's a massive confidence boost. How much time he'll get, you don't expect him to start, obviously, but how much time he might get off the bench is something we'll have to wait and see. But just to have him back in the squad, hopefully will boost the spirits, because they've missed him. They haven't really got a player who can do the things he does. He's that creative element of that side, who we probably haven't actually seen the best of, in truth, when he has been playing, but he still is just that danger man. He draws defenders away from Callum Wilson and what have you. So good news that he's back, but it's a huge game for Newcastle. Like they need to, at the very least, put in a decent performance. I mean, obviously we want the 3 points from Newcastle point of view, a point if not that. But if you lose, you're going to have to lose. Not deserving to lose, or at least when you speak about it afterwards with your friends and family, you can say, oh, well, Newcastle, had 1 or 2, 3 or 4 opportunities. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what you want as a fan, to have that conversation where you don't just sit there and say, well, yeah, it was lucky it wasn't 5, 6, 7-0. Do you know what I mean? That's what you want. I think that's where pundits get it wrong for Newcastle as well. There's no expectation of this exciting football, or, throwing caution to the wind, the Kevin Keegan era. That's not what Newcastle United fans want. They just want to be competitive in terms of, not just turn up and a points a bonus. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, I look at Villa and I'm envious. I am envious, because they've got a good setup. They've got some really good players, and like you say, the top 10 is probably the expectation this season.
I was going to ask, you've mentioned St-Maximin, and that's going to be a massive boost, as you say. But I'm sure that the Newcastle fans listening to this don't want to hear a Bull Brummy crowing on about how great things are in this corner of Birmingham. I was going to say, what has the positive been? For there must be one player, or there must be something that's kind of giving you something to cling on throughout this.
Well, I mean, Callum Wilson's been superb. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's been a massive signing, and why the top 6 side didn't come in for Callum Wilson is still beyond me. And even with the limited service, he's still getting the goals. Okay, he's only scored 2 in the last 9, but without Callum Wilson's form, I dread to think where Newcastle United would be, because his goals are the reason Newcastle are looking slightly more comfortable than they probably would be without him. And I don't know. I mean, looking at this season, there was the beat to Everton, the West Ham game, the first game of the season was quite good, but other than that, it really has been as dire as it looks from the outside, and they've scraped some points against West Brom. They were fortunate, in my opinion. Against Fulham, who were down to 10 men again, they were fortunate. And that seemed to maybe be the turning point, where, as before, they would probably win that game against Fulham, and maybe not deserve it. They got a point and were fortunate to get that point. And that's what I mean by now. The results are now mirroring the performance. And Steve Bruce was impressed with the way they played in the first half, I think, against Arsenal. And it was a massive improvement on the performance against Sheffield United. But they came out in the second half, and again, thanks to Caldalo, it was fortunate it was only 3-0. And you just dread what's coming, because for me personally, I can't see where the goals are coming from. I can't see where the next points are coming from. Against Arsenal, it was Steve Bruce's way. It was effectively 4-4-2. But the wingers were Joe Linton, who's not a winger, and Almiron, who's not a big crosser of the ball. That's not his strong point. And yet you had Callum Wilson and Andy Carroll up top. And then 70 minutes gone, Andy Carroll comes off the pitch. He throws Jacob Murphy on. And at that point, you're scratching your head thinking, but Jacob Murphy's the one that can provide the crosses. And it's just moments like that for me where I'm just scratching my head and thinking, well, what is the thinking behind that? And look, he's under a lot of pressure, Steve Bruce, and he is trying his best to sort this out. And I don't think any Newcastle United fan would begrudge him to turn this around and suddenly, what's at the end of the season, if Newcastle are in the top 8 or whatever, because he's got on this amazing run of form. I think every Newcastle fan wants that. They want to see their club do well. But just right now, looking at the form, it could be no win in 10 games in all competition. I think it's something ridiculous. Like, was it maybe 1 goal in the last 8 games, something like that? That could be 1 in 9. The stats don't look good. The form doesn't look good. However, I do have some stats which on this game are in Newcastle's favour. Villa have only won once in 14 games in this fixture. However, they could win successive home matches against Newcastle in the Premier League for the first time, for only the second time. So a little bit of hope there for Newcastle if you're a fan of stats. However, yeah, I'm fearful. I am fearful.
The thing that probably won't thank me for mentioning this, but the thing that summed it up for me and summed up kind of how bleak it is for you guys at the moment was we got the guy on, the old sub on the time banner. We got him on a podcast yesterday. And, he's a bit of a mischievous so-and-so. It was all done in supposedly in good fun from this end. But he was saying genuinely that he actually feels sympathy for Newcastle with the kind of what he called the kind of dual issue of Mike Ashley, kind of an owner who's really kind of lost interest, and Steve Bruce, a manager who's kind of lost his way. And, saying, as much as he kind of mocked and took the mickey out of them, during, I think it was 2009, wasn't it, initially, that relegation day.
I remember it well.
Yeah, I should imagine you do, yeah. As much as he kind of had some fun at Newcastle's expense then, he feels for the club now, because it's not nice. It's not nice for any football club to be devoid of hope, really. So I thought, I don't know whether Newcastle fans will find that even worse, that their nemesis is now kind of pitying them, or whether that's just a sign of how miserable it is at the moment.
Do you know what? He's spot on, because at the end of the day, this comes back to one man, and it is Mike Ashley. He is the man in control. He's the man who has set the targets. He's the man who's, I would say, is under invested in this club over the last 12 years. And this is and it really could be any manager. We saw what happened under Rafa Benitez. He didn't get what he wanted, and who would imagine Rafa Benitez battling just to get a side in the top 10? Do you know what I mean? That's not what Rafa Benitez has done in his career, but he had to do it here, and he had to, really go to war for transfers and what have you. And at the end of the day, Steve Bruce should be doing better with this squad. He is under pressure. He needs a result. But there's an argument to say it could literally be any manager. And in time with Mike Ashley still here, the same problems would continue to arise. That said, Steve Bruce has had a bit of money to spend. He's convinced the hierarchy to bring in players like Callum Wilson, whereas before they may not have spent that amount of money on Wilson, regardless of how good he is. There are some big contracts being handed out. Shelvey, Ritchie, Kieran Clark again. Arguably, a couple of years ago, players of the same age wouldn't have got these big deals. So Steve Bruce is managing to change things a little bit, and now he has to find the formation that he wants to stick with. He said he's going to do it his way. He's explained a bit about today in the press conference what that means, about pushing further up the field. And he needs to find a way to make that work, and he needs to believe in the system that he wants to choose, and stick with it, because there's no consistency in the formations he's using. There's been a bit of change here, and well, not a bit. There's been a lot of change in setup and formation, and that can't help players. How can you get down and do your job if you're only playing the same formation 2 games in a row, and then you're changing it, and then that stays for 3 or 4 games, and then you're changing it again. So look, there's lots of caveats to what's happening with Steve Bruce, but at the end of the day, he's the manager who's sending the team out in a certain way, and he's got to now get these results. This is a pivotal week for Steve Bruce at Newcastle United, with Villa and then Leeds coming up.
Yeah, just to kind of end it on a positive, really. Hopefully Newcastle don't come to Villa Park and turn Villa over tomorrow. But I think when they do arrive at Villa and when the fans are watching it on the television, we feel your pain. You know what I mean? We've been down there. We've had a bleak 10 years as Villa fans. You know, from one minute we were knocking on the door to the Champions League, and then the rug was pulled, and we found ourselves spending 3 years in the Championship. So, but there is a glimmer of hope. You know, I know it's a big if and a big but, and you've got to. It's not just a takeover happening in a new manager. It's getting the right takeover, and it's getting the right manager. So there's a lot of the stars have got to align quite spectacularly to get it right. But it can happen, and if it happens, and you do get that formula right, you know, it can happen kind of quite spectacularly. And this is not Villa getting carried away, because Villa, you know, Villa staying in the Premier League for another season will be an achievement, to be honest, even though we're kind of setting our sights a bit higher. But just got to kind of hang in there, because, you know, without being too kind of cliched or too twee about it, those fans will be allowed back in St James's Park, you know, eventually, and it's their club. And regardless of Mike Ashley, whether he's a bad custodian or a wrong custodian at football club, you know, eventually these things go in cycles, and it'll happen. It'll happen, and it's bleak and it's grim. But just kind of hang on in there. Wait until after tomorrow before you start the revival. But the revival will happen eventually, and when it comes, it'll be great fun, I'm sure.
Well, from my point of view, fingers crossed it does start more. I was at Villa Park last season. I was in the away end, and that was my first away trip as a fan in many years. You know, we're talking like 15 years, and to be in the away end and watching what happened was just remarkable, because Villa were just. I think Villa must have been in the relegation zone, if I'm not mistaken, and they were absolutely brilliant that night. And Newcastle were absolutely shocking. And I'm just hoping tomorrow is a bit different from a Newcastle perspective anyway, that, you know, they can get a result, because, you know, they really do need it. Yeah, I mean, what's your score prediction?
Oh, God, it's going to come back and bite me on the backside. I'll go for a 2-0 Villa. I think Villa will be... Listen, I thought Villa did brilliantly the other day, considering that they had 2 weeks off. And we don't know which of the players had positive tests and stuff with COVID, but I thought the energy that they showed to try and match a kind of Man City side in a menacing mood was great. But I think Villa will be kind of a bit like a wounded animal. I mean, I'm probably biased. I still can't work out that the offside decision for that first goal. And I don't think anybody other than referee John Moss had got that particular memo about that rule tweak. So I think Villa will be anxious to kind of make sure that they you know, I think they've got 4 games in hand on 3 or 4 games in hand on most of the Premier League, and they want to be in those upper echelons. So I think Villa, you know, will be really, really at it tomorrow, hopefully. So from a Villa point of view, I don't think they're going to make Newcastle's life any easier. So I'm expecting a decent game, to be honest. Saturday night as well, so you can have, you know, you're allowed to have a few beers with it, I think, without it being on a school night. So yeah, let's hope it's a brilliant game. Let's hope Villa win this one. But like I say, we'll delay the Newcastle revival for another week.
Well, it's fair to say, looking through the comments, Villa fans looking quite confident. I mean, you can see, there we go, 4-1 that prediction, 2-0 there. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of confidence, I think, from Villa fans. But yeah, well, thank you for popping on, and hopefully your prediction is wrong from a Newcastle point of view. And Newcastle's revival will start tomorrow, although I'm not overly confident. I just can't see them beating Villa tomorrow. I mean, just finally, obviously, we've talked a little bit about the COVID impact, and that was their first game, you know, the Man City game in a few weeks. How badly has it impacted them? Would you think they'll be drained coming into this game against Newcastle after playing their first game in so many weeks?
I think they probably will, because of the intensity that they did play that game at. I suppose the kickoff going back to 8 o'clock rather than 3 o'clock gives them a few more extra hours. The really encouraging thing about Villa prior to that COVID enforced break was that we're saying Villa got a belting. You know, Villa got a belting first 11. I think they can go toe to toe with most of the Premier League, as we saw when they dismantled Liverpool. What will happen if you scratch beneath the surface? Is there enough quality? And I think that's been one of the encouraging things. That I've said, they've got that competition for places in right wing. You know, young Jacob Ramsey's emerged as a Premier League ready midfielder. So I think what I'm saying in a long-winded way is, I think there's potentially they will be a bit drained, but the good thing is that these deputies who seem to be kind of well drilled in what's expected of them, and knowing that if they don't come in and take their chance, then they might not get another one for another kind of 4 or 5 weeks. So, I think that I hope that the Manchester City experience and the disappointment of the way that ended will inspire Villa, rather than the kind of them being too jaded from the exertion that they put in that night.
Well, there we have it. Well, fingers crossed. Anyway, like I say, from a Newcastle point of view, the villains are a bit tired, and Steve Bruce can get that all-important win. Matt, thanks for joining us. To everyone who's watching across these Reach PLC channels, getting the company in there, ticking the boxes. Thank you very much. Please do subscribe on the Claret and Boo YouTube channel and on the Everything is Black and White podcast, where, depending on where your allegiances lie. Thank you very much for tuning in.
Brilliant. Up the Villa.